Hello everyone, this is Samirian, and in this video I've been asked to show how to track what position a player finishes in either path-based race creator or just the normal race creator. They both work exactly the same. So we're going to show how we did that. Now the thing is, with a path there is no logic you can hook up to these race creator things, so you have to build the entire thing yourself, and I'll explain as I'm going. The first thing we're going to grab here is we're going to go into the creativity toys, and I'm sort of going to work backwards to better explain exactly how everything's working. The first thing we need to do is we need to track we need some counters to track some things, and we're going to use 3 counters to track AI and other players, and we're going to use a single counter to track player 1, because in this setup the only person we're really paying attention to is what position does player 1 finish in. So with these counters, I'm going to set them, the 3 that are up here, I'm going to turn them all to visible display of off. And we're going to be using some basic math here. Now, a race is 3 laps, and we need to know how many times have the AI, or if there's other players playing the other players, how many times have they passed this finish line. So we're going to keep track of that with these three counters. I thought I put 3 counters down. 3 counters. And so basically what we want to know is if the player finishes first, then that will mean he will cross this finish line 3 times before the other 3 people have crossed it. Basically 6. If he beats the math is fun sometimes. Basically, if your player is going to be the last one to cross this line, then he would cross this line 3 times after the AI, because there's 3 of them, have passed it 9 times. Because there's 3 other players, or 3 other racers going, and there's 3 laps per. So if an AI has passed this line 9 times, because we can't track each of those racers separately. So if an AI has passed that line 9 times, then that means we are in 4th place. Now, if that line has only been passed 8 times by other AI, then that means you've come in 3rd place. And I've already set this one to 7, and that would mean you've come in 2nd place. Now, if it's anything less than 7, that means you have come in 1st place. So what we're going to be building here is, it's a logic chain, and you can look through a lot of my videos if you want to understand exactly how this logic chain is working. But in essence, what we're doing here is we are going to take the input blocked message from the 1st and the 2nd logic gate and put it to the one below it. We're linking them all together. So the idea here is, and I'm going to throw down some time delayers and I'll explain why, but the idea is if the player passes that line 3 times, that means he has finished the race. And I'm going to keep this display on just so we can see what's happening. So once he's crossed that line 3 times, we are going to send an input to the top logic gate in this logic chain. Now, if the AI have crossed that line 7 times, we're going to close this logic gate, which will pass the signal down to the next one, which means you are in 2nd place. Now, if target reached of 8 is hit, we're going to close this logic gate, which means the signal is going to pass all the way down and come out the output here, which means you're in 3rd. And if that line's been crossed 9 times, we're going to close this logic gate so the signal will come all the way through and come out the input blocked here, meaning you've come in last place. So we're going to say the output of that 1st logic gate goes to the 1st time delayer. The output of the second logic gate goes to the second timed layer. The output of the third logic gate is going, not to that one. Output of the third logic gate is going to this timed layer. And the input block of the last logic gate is going to the last timed layer. And we're going to set all of these to 2 seconds. Now the reason we're setting them to 2 seconds is because when the race is over, when the player finally finishes or crosses that finish line, there's a slight delay and then it brings up the results screen. And I can't really affect the results screen at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait till that results screen pops up, and then I'm going to display some text, because my text won't actually show up until the player has cleared the results screen. So that's why I'm doing a delay of 2 seconds here. And then I'm going to throw down a text creator, and I'm not even going to put any text in it. We're just going to know if it's text 1 I came in first, text 2 I came in second, text 3 I came in third, text 4 I came in fourth. So delay completed will display text 1, and delay completed will display text 2, and delay completed will display text 3, and delay completed will display text 4. There we go. So this is the logic that is tracking the race. Now, we want to make sure that you can't really cheat the race. So what we're going to do, and again we're working backwards here, is we're going to put a logic gate here and a logic gate here. And we're going to throw up a trigger area. Now, I'm going to throw up all the trigger areas while I've got the trigger areas up. We're going to use 3 of them in total for what we're doing here. And I'm actually going to make it a bit wider than the actual race line there, just simply because that's getting annoying. Simply because of the fact that the player doesn't have to specifically cross that line for the lap to count. So there we go. So now what we're going to do is we're going to say if this is entered by player 1, we're going to send a message to this one logic gate. However, and I'm designing this so that if any AI enters, we're going to send an input to the other logic gate. Now I also like to design it in case there's other players playing. And I don't care what position the other players fall into, but they're going to mess up the count if I don't have enough AI on the screen. So I like to make sure that I'm going to set it up so if it's all other players also playing, I still know how many times they've also crossed this line. So that was player 3, and then we're going to do player 4. So now if any AI crosses that line, or any player other than player 1 crosses the line, this logic gate gets a signal. And if player 1 crosses it, this logic gate gets a signal. Now logic gates default to open, and I don't want this to work by default. I want something to happen before this whole circuitry comes on. So I'm going to be using the input blocked out of these logic gates. I have to physically close this logic gate for it to start working. And this logic gate, the input blocked, is going to send an increment to all 3 of these counters. They all have to know what the actual count is. And then the input blocked of the other logic gate we have up here that is only tracking player 1 is going to be going to this one counter that is simply tracking how many laps player 1 has finished so far. There we go. That part's done. Now, we also want, I thought I was going to put the other trigger areas up. I'm going to put a trigger area up over the actual race area. And what it's going to be looking for, it's going to be looking for an AI to enter it, or player 4. If player 4 enters it, there's absolutely no AI. So the only player I really need to check for is player 4. And we're going to send that message to a logic gate, or a logic AND. So if entered by any AI, whoops. Now the thing with a logic AND is you have to be careful, because if I had hooked it up straight from the trigger area, then the logic AND would have only fired if any AI entered here and player 4 entered here. But I want it to work if either does it. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to say if any AI enters, go to this logic gate as an input, and or if player 4 enters, send an input to this logic gate. And now I hook the output of the logic gate to the logic AND, and that way it only has the one input coming into it. So it will fire if it receives if an output comes out of that logic gate, this logic AND will fire and it will never fire again. And what it's going to be firing on is we need 2 more logic gates here. And we need 1 more trigger area as well. And we're going to put a trigger area at the other side of the race, about halfway through the race. And what this is doing, this is making sure that this system is harder to cheat. It's not impossible to cheat, but it's harder to cheat because player 1 has to cross this trigger area before he crosses the race gate a second time, or else it's not going to even recognize that he crossed it again. And we're going to do that by opening and closing logic gates. So what we're going to do here, we're going to borrow this logic gate for a second, bring it over here just to make it easier to connect things. We're going to be doing the same thing. We're going to be looking for if any AI enters it, or any player other than player 1. It's going to send an input to that. And so we want player 2 inputting to it. We want player 3 inputting to it. And again, you don't have to go quite this in depth. This is just me making sure that if somehow 4 players are playing in the game, it's still going to work properly. Okay. So we've got all the inputs to this logic gate. And we know already that this logic gate is waiting to be closed. So we're going to say if any of those enter that trigger area, the input blocked is going to send a close to this. Now this logic gate is defaulted to open. It's not closed yet either. And so what we're waiting for is either an AI or player 4 to enter this area, and it's going to close this logic gate, which will allow that trigger area on the other side to work. So once any AI or any player other than player 2 gets to that trigger area, it's going to close the system so it starts tracking. Now we want to be more finicky with player 1. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, because player 1 is the one who's going to figure out, hey, if I just back up and keep crossing that finish line, I'm going to finish this race in no time. We don't want him to be able to do that. So we're going to say if player 1 enters, he will be an input to this logic gate. And this one is also going to work on the system that it has to be closed. So the input blocked is going to close this logic gate. And this logic AND, when the race starts, is going to close this one. Now we want to make sure he has to get back over there and cross that trigger area again before he can cross this finish line again. So what we're going to do is we're going to say when this logic gate closes, we want to open this logic gate so that it no longer works. And when this logic gate closes, we want to open this logic gate so it no longer works. And again, input blocked of that one. We've already closing this one, but the input block of this one has to make sure that trigger area. And we do that so that when you finish a lap, it resets and allows this trigger area to be active again, waiting for you to get there so it can activate this one again so you can complete your second lap. So this is the logic behind it, and we're going to test this out really quick, and I'm going to aim to not get in first place. I'm not sure what place I'll actually end up in, but I'm going to probably aim for second or third place, and we should get a text that will say the text and then the number is going to be the same as the position I finish in, hopefully. So let's give this a try. There, the two of those guys took off. Okay, so third place isn't too bad. I don't mind third place. Are you gonna make me take second? He's gonna make me take second. I will stay in second place. Finish this race quick enough. Now hopefully all these counters are keeping track of everything right now. Well, the counter just popped up saying I've just finished my second lap, so that's always a good sign, and we turned off all the other counters. So right now all the AI are on their third lap, so that count should be at 6 right now. And when this guy in front of me crosses, it'll hit 7, which will close that logic gate so that when I pass, the race is over. And of course that text's not going to display until I clear this results section, but it should pop up and say text 2. Text 2, there. The race knew I finished in position number 2, and that's based solely on counting how many times the AI or other players have crossed that finish line compared to how many times I have crossed it. So again, this is Sumerian. This is the logic behind building your own system so you can track what position player 1 finishes in a race you build. I hope it's been helpful. I hope it hasn't been too confusing. If you have any questions, of course, feel free to ask me. And as always, have yourselves all a wonderful day.